Welcome to r/nosleep, where we get to hear the scariest stories on the internet. W. Hey guys, I just started an Amazon affiliate link, so if you want to help me be able to make better content, please purchase something by clicking the link in the description and purchasing anything. It won't cost you anything extra and will really help build this community. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy the video. I received an unsettling email from the FutureMe website. It was 15 minutes to 5, the end of a long week of work. I was seated at my desk, going through the last of my emails. It had been a busy day, but I was down to the last urgent request, and the rest could wait until Monday. As I finished up my response, I got another email. It was from the FutureMe website. The name of the site was familiar. I had seen it pop up in Reddit threads a lot. As far as I could recall, it was a service that allowed people to send a letter to themselves in the future. I couldn't remember ever using it though. My hands shook slightly as I moved the mouse to open the message. The reaction was inexplicable. A quirky message from past me. What was wrong about that? I should have felt curious, slightly amused. Instead, my heartbeat faltered, and my palm greased the mouse with sweat. I stalled, my eyes darting around the open plan office. The boss hadn't come in that day, so my co-workers had chosen to bow out early. I was practically alone, apart from Carly, an eager intern who was typing away at her desk on the other end of the room. Our eyes met over a sea of partitions, and I quickly looked away. I turned my attention back to the screen, and opened the email. The following is an email from the past, composed on April 16th, 2016. It is being delivered from the past through FutureMe.org. Dear Future Colin, your wife resides at XXXX Ashbury Lane. The fish are in the water. I stared at the screen, dumbfounded. I didn't know you had a wife. My arms jerked in alarm as Carly appeared out of nowhere, sweeping my shoulder with strands of hair as she bent over me to stare at the screen. What was she doing? I don't, I replied, my voice strained. I closed the browser and signed out of my work account. Excuse me. Carly took a step back as I stood up and started gathering my things. She took a seat in a neighboring chair and started fiddling with a bobblehead replica of my co-worker's dog. Her eyes never left my face. "Wanna grab a drink?" she asked, a smirk playing on her lips. I paused to look at her. I was in my late 30s, almost entirely bald, and generally average looking. Carly was a buxom 20-something with dashing red hair and emerald eyes. Her long legs and tight skirts had been the highlight of many workdays, but her asking me out felt wrong. "Excuse me? There's a decent bar not far from here." Carly's voice deepened, revealing sultry notes I had never heard before. She shifted in the office chair, flashing thigh as she crossed her legs. "Oh," I stammered, not knowing where to put my hands. Suddenly conscious of how my shoulders were hunching forward. "That's very kind of you, but I should get going. I have other plans." "Change them." Carly cupped her face in her hands. She leaned over the desk on her elbows, pressing her generous cleavage onto the wooden surface. "We could have a lot of fun tonight." "Really wish I could, but I have to go." I grabbed the rest of my stuff and darted toward the elevators before she could say another word. The girl was beautiful, but there was something almost predatory in the way she had approached me. Instead of being turned on, I felt rattled, disturbed. I took my first steady breaths only after getting home. I entered my kitchen through the garage, eager to grab a drink from the fridge. My shoulders relaxed as I thought about the night ahead. I'd watch a movie, go to bed early. Jeff's barbecue was at noon the next day, and I was looking forward to seeing the guys. I tried to put the ML and Carly out of my mind. I pulled a Corona from the back of my fridge, opener at the ready, when something caught my attention. The bottle cap looked as though it had been tampered with. I put down the opener and ran a finger over the ridges of the lid, testing its fold. The cap was fixed tightly on the bottle, but there were dents all around the circumference of the lid, like someone had used a tool to reseal it. I went back to the fridge and pulled out the remaining 2 bottles. They were the same. I used the opener on the first one, and it came off without a pop. I sniffed the beer. It was the familiar blend of yeast and herb, but there was something else too. It was very slight, and I wouldn't have noticed if I wasn't paying attention, but there was a medicinal note mixed in there. Chemical, almost. Something familiar, but not in the context of beer. I opened the other 2 beers and emptied all 3 in the sink. I sat down at the kitchen table and listened to the sounds of my house. I lived alone. My place was on the smaller side, a 2-story with 2 bedrooms. I didn't have a wife, never had. There had been girlfriends, I had even lived with a few back in the day, but no recent relationships. So who had been inside my house? Who was possibly still there? I considered calling the police, but I sounded like a madman even to myself. Officer, there was this email. Then an attractive co-worker asked me out, and then my beers didn't pop when I opened them. Coincidence? I think not. It sounded stupid. So why was I so afraid to leave the kitchen and inspect the rest of the house? I stared at the patterns in the wood of my kitchen table. They were repetitive, cyclical. Dark swirls and spots. If I stared long enough they started to look man-made, artificial. Nothing natural could be this elaborate, could it? Enough. I pulled out my phone and googled the address in the message. It was only 20 minutes from my house. I'm a fucking moron. I mumbled under my breath as I threw my work jacket back on and went out to the garage. There was some weekend traffic, but half an hour later I was parked across the street from an abandoned lot. A flimsy wire fence surrounded the territory, with budget suburban houses standing on either side. The street lights came on as I climbed out of the car. So it was just a stupid prank. There was nothing here. I couldn't help it. I felt disappointed. I walked over to the sidewalk and lingered at the threshold of the abandoned property. I couldn't just enter it, could I? No. But I did. The lot was bigger than it appeared from the road. It was longer than it was wide, and as I walked through it, I started feeling something strange. There was nothing here but dirt and weed tufts, but every now and then my eye would catch the neighboring house at an angle, or I'd see a glint of something at the corner of my eye. I would turn to look, and there'd be nothing to latch onto, but there was a sense of something here. What was I missing? I had made it to the far side of the fence before I saw it. I walked over to the lonely man-made pond, dread guiding my every step. There was nothing threatening about this lot, about this place. But as the sun set further on the horizon, the chill of the evening crept up my spine and settled in my bones. The fish are in the water. The water was murky brown, the surface of it rippling with the breeze. I couldn't see the bottom of the pond. Some bubbles surfaced, and 2 bulbous eyes emerged. A fat koi poked its toothless mouth out, gulping at the air. Hello, Colin. I spun around to see a woman standing not far from me. She was short, slim, her entire frame huddled in a long cardigan that ended just above the ankles. There was a blue scarf wrapped around her face and shoulders. The left side of her face was stretched over in scar tissue, the skin drooping off the edge of her jawline. She must have received those injuries in a fire. The eyes were unharmed, dark brown, bearing into mine with severity. Who are you? I murmured. A brook of memory bubbled and flowed in a corner of my mind. It threatened to flood over if I pushed too hard. Did I know this woman? No. Yes. The woman walked over and took my right hand between both her palms. Her touch sent bolts of electricity through my body. It meant something. The nerve endings on my fingertips danced to the feel of her skin. I placed my free hand on top of hers, grazing the rubbery scar tissue. I wondered if her whole body had been affected by the fire, or just her face and hands. I had a sudden urge to hold her, kiss her, protect her. I didn't know from what. Maybe from the past, from the things that happened to her face. A motor revved somewhere in the distance and the woman jerked her head back to look at the empty street. Panic entered her eyes as she pulled away from me. I was about to repeat my question when I realized she had left something in my hand. I looked down at my shaking, cupped palm. It was a pill capsule, larger than any medicine I had ever taken, and the color was odd, metallic. I picked it up with 2 fingers, examining it. It felt heavy for such a small object, solid. It looked like a pill, but felt more like a bullet. I looked back up to see that the woman had made it all the way to the other side of the lot. Wait, I shouted after her, but she only sped up. The car motor grew louder, and I heard wheels screech as the vehicle rounded the corner onto Ashbury Lane. A giant, black SUV appeared at the far end of the street and roared down the narrow road. I caught one last glimpse of the woman's scarf as she disappeared behind the tall shrubbery of the neighboring backyard. The monster vehicle pulled up in front of the lot. Every window was tinted, and there were no visible number plates on the car. My phone beeped in my pocket. Now wasn't the time, but I pulled it out anyway. It was another email, this time addressed to my personal account. The following is an email from the past, composed on April 16th, 2016. It is being delivered from the past through FutureMe.org. Dear future Colin, run. You might be wondering how I ended up in front of Jeff's house 5 minutes past 12 on a lazy Saturday afternoon. I mean, I kind of left you guys hanging when the black SUV pulled up after the strange woman disappeared into someone's backyard. An email from FutureMe.org instructed me to run, but I didn't do that. You have to understand something about me. I was a simple man living a small life. I went to work every day to deal with customer complaints. I enjoyed watching sports and spending time with my friends. Sometimes I would try out a new hobby or go on a date, but rarely. It just wasn't all that important to me. I'm sorry if I'm droning on. I just wanted to make it clear how absolutely wild the events of the previous day were compared to the general landscape of my humble existence. I had fully expected to find nothing and no one at Ashbury Lane. The whole reason I went there was to put a lid on the paranoia. When that didn't happen, my mind reverted to the most basic form of sanity retention. Denial. I did not panic. I did not run. I calmly pocketed both my phone and the pill. I strolled back through the empty property, humming a melody to soothe my nerves. I watched my shoes sink in the sand, never so much as glancing at the black SUV that stood beneath a paling street light. I crossed the road, got in my car, and drove home. When I got there, I didn't stop to inspect the fridge or look for intruders. I poured myself a cup of water and went upstairs. Just your average nightly routine. Shower, floss, brush. I changed into my pajamas, slipping the metallic capsule from my jean pocket to my pajama shirt pocket. My denial faltered there, but I kept up appearances as I turned off the lights and climbed between the sheets. In the darkness, I unbuttoned the top of my shirt and slid a trembling hand over my heart, feeling it throb beneath my skin. My fingers needed the pocket, tracing the shape of the pill. I had put my shirt on inside out in hopes of preventing the capsule from falling out by mistake or being taken. The next morning seemed blissfully normal. There was nothing suspicious about my orange juice, milk, or cereal. There were no unlicensed vehicles parked in my street. It was the warmest day we'd had all year, and it was a Saturday, so no work, no flirting interns. Hopefully, no emails. I was excited about the barbecue. I really needed a break, a distraction. My friend Jeff and I had met 5 years ago when I first moved to the neighborhood. He was the only other single man living on our street. Everyone else was settled with kids, dogs, garden gnomes. I rang the doorbell and took a step back. The door flew open less than a minute later. Colin, my man, Jeff appeared in the doorway, beer in hand. How the hell are ya? I wanted to go in for a friendly half hug, but something stopped me. Jeff's cheerful demeanor felt plastic. There was a hint of restlessness in his stance, an edge to his posture. He had always towered over me, muscular and broad-shouldered, but his big build had never felt like a threat. Until now. It's been a weird few days, I admitted, trying to shake off the gentle tremors running through my limbs. Tell us all about it. Jeff motioned to the living room as we walked. The guys are all here. I paused in the doorway, a festering dread choking out any chance of having a normal afternoon. I could count at least 8 men in Jeff's living room, but there were more. Some were seated, others standing. The moment I walked in, all eyes were glued to me. These were not the glances of casual acquaintances dropping by for some beers and grilled meat. They were pointed, calculating. No one made a sound. Jeff stood at my side, and I turned to look at him. His face was calm, but there was a coolness in his gaze as he observed the growing panic in mine. His mouth stretched over in a friendly smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. There was no warmth there, only accusation. You remember Paul and Todd? I glanced back at the gathering, barely recognizing my 2 poker buddies. Up until then, Todd had been the quirkiest guy I'd ever met, always at my side with a joke or a pick-me-up. There was no humor in his face now. Paul was usually quite meek, subdued even. He sat in an armchair, posture upright, eyes narrowed, jaw clenched. What had I just walked into? Something wrong, Colin? Jeff asked. I just haven't been feeling well lately, I stammered, trying to keep the shakiness out of my voice. Do you think I could use your bathroom? Sure thing. Jeff's voice was so low now, barely above a whisper. The downstairs bathroom is out of order. Use the one upstairs. I turned around and walked through the hall and up the stairs in what I hoped was a casual manner. I hated the silence that amplified every step I took, my squeaky shoes sending echoes through Jeff's house. Once inside the bathroom, I flipped the door lock shut and stumbled over to the sink. I held onto the ceramic edges, steadying my shaking frame. I could barely recognize myself in the reflection on the wall. My eyes were puffy from a restless night of sleep. Every facial muscle was strained, the lines on my forehead moving in agitation. My phone vibrated in my back pocket, and I already knew what to expect. The following is an email from the past, composed on April 17th, 2016. It is being delivered from the past through FutureMe.org. Dear Future Colin. 2 twists right, 1 twist back. Nothing to fear with the powder attack. Sorry, what? I couldn't understand the email, and I was starting to feel claustrophobic within the confines of the bathroom. The blue tiles on the wall skipped before my eyes. They appeared to draw closer, threatening to flatten me out of existence. I was losing it. I needed fresh air, so I walked over to the narrow bathroom window and opened the blinds. I flipped the lock and threw the pane open. I looked down at Jeff's front lawn and stumbled back in horror. Every man I had seen in the living room was now out on the grass. They stood slightly apart from one another, positioned in rows, like they were part of an outdoor yoga lesson. They remained perfectly still, heads raised toward the bathroom window, looking directly at me. One of the men tilted his head and waved. I feigned nonchalance as I rolled down the blinds without closing the window. I felt it was important to keep my cool within their line of vision, but I wasn't sure I was fooling anyone. I felt trapped, afraid, and entirely helpless. Above all, I couldn't fathom why any of this was happening. Why now? Why me? Or thought occurred to me. It seemed out there, but definitely no more bizarre than anything else that had happened since I received the email. I had kept the pill on me at all times, since the woman in the blue headscarf had placed it inside my hand. Somehow, the instructions made sense in the context of the capsule. 2 twists right, 1 twist back. Nothing to fear with the powder attack. I pulled it out from my jacket pocket. I twisted the cap of the capsule to the right. Surprisingly, it rotated smoothly. I twisted it a second time, then rotated it back to the left. The capsule exploded in green smoke. It was so near my face that I ended up inhaling the greater part of the chemical. The green powder looped through the air and then disappeared. It was all but gone seconds after it burst in my hand. There was no residue on my skin, no stains on the bathroom walls. The substance hadn't smelled like anything. It didn't sting my nostrils or throat. It tickled my lungs, but not in a bad way. At first nothing happened, and then my mind erupted in migraine. It was so acute, so painful, that I collapsed on the tile floor, keeling over on my knees. I groaned as I choked back vomit, my vision blurring and blacking. My eardrums throbbed something awful, and I thought I was going to die. It lasted less than a minute, then stopped. All of it. My head was fine. I no longer felt sick. I stood back up and walked over to the sink. I needed to wash away my sweat. I turned on the tap and lifted my face to the mirror. I froze, water dripping off my chin. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My hazel eyes had turned luminous, sour green, like highlighter ink. My phone vibrated again. The following is an email from the past, composed on April 17th, 2016. It is being delivered from the past through FutureMe.org. Dear Future Colin. Listen. Listen to what? I tried though. I pulled down the seat lid and sat on Jeff's toilet. At first I didn't hear anything, but then I strained my ears a little, kind of like I would my eyes if a sign was far away. I was essentially squinting to hear. Todd's voice was the first I recognized. It traveled to me from below, from somewhere in Jeff's kitchen. I shouldn't have been able to hear it so clearly inside my mind. The pill had enhanced my sense of hearing. So what does it mean? Is he back? We don't understand it yet. It's not what the higher-ups thought would happen. Jeff sounded agitated. So it wasn't amnesia. That one sounded like Paul. He knew all along. Look, I know about as much as you both. The subject is receiving communications from the scientist. We have learned Alanis is still alive. We don't know what it all means and we can't tell how much the subject remembers. I can't believe all this is happening 5 years later, Todd's voice complained. I was getting reassigned a week from Monday. Me too, Paul agreed. So was I, Jeff replied, but it seems the scientist knew this would happen, that we'd be off our guard after so much time had passed. There was a lull in the conversation. I heard some light shuffling. I zoned in on it, realizing it was one of the men adjusting his belt. It was crazy to be able to hear in such vivid detail. I couldn't explain how I knew what the sounds were, but I did. My new hearing shaped the world just out of reach, defining it. At the same time, it was noise cancelling. I heard only what I needed to, without being overwhelmed by the sounds of the world around me. Should we check on him? He's been in that bathroom a long time. I heard footfall as the 3 men moved through the house, toward the staircase. I had very little time to make my move. I slipped out of the bathroom, and down the hall. My hearing caught a radio crackling at the bottom of the stairs. Agents, the subject is on the move. Rapid footsteps ascended the stairs as I dashed into Jeff's bedroom, to the window. I threw it open as my imposter friends reached the landing of the 2nd floor. There was no one on the other side of the house, only a lonely grill standing at the far end of Jeff's backyard. My heart tightened as I took a second to stare at it. It was the last pillar of normality, standing upright, black and charred. It was a gravestone to my life as I knew it. Uneventful, calm, ordinary. Everything I had known to be real was crumbling around me, and I needed to stop playing blind and accept it. I threw open the window and climbed onto the ledge. I latched the fingers of both hands into the gutter above, pulling myself up onto the roof of Jeff's house with next to no effort. That's when I learned that the pill was good for more than just my hearing. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. If you liked it, please consider subscribing as it really motivates me to make more of these videos. Have an amazing day.